Hey, what's up, guys? This is Marc at Sound Theory Studio. Hope you're doing well, as always. And this is part 2 of sweep picking, conquering it once and for all. I assume you've watched part 1 and you've been working on that technique. Part 1 is vital, so if you haven't watched part 1 yet, make sure and do that, and I'll put a link to it on the screen right now. Part 1, we go over how to do sweep picking as far as the actual technique, how to hold the pick, what kind of pick to use, so on and so on and so on and so forth. And we also went over your first exercise, which was playing that C major arpeggio over 3 strings. So now I'm going to assume that you're watching part 2 because you're pretty good at that and you feel like you're ready to move on. So the next thing we want to do is, at the intro to this video, you saw me doing an exercise. And I'm going to teach you that exercise today, and that's an exercise I did a lot when I was learning to get, pretty good at sweep picking. And I'm thinking it'll probably help you too. So basically what I was doing during the intro was playing a major arpeggio, then a minor arpeggio, then a diminished arpeggio over 3 strings, moving down the fretboard 1 fret at a time as I went through all 3 shapes. The reason I did that is because, first of all, it's not good enough just to know how to sweep pick. You need to know your shapes too. You need to know your arpeggios. And I can't get into like a full theory lesson here, of course, but what I can tell you is that a major arpeggio, and a major chord for that matter, is made up of the 1, 3, and 5 of the major scale. The minor arpeggio and the minor chord are made up of the 1, the flat 3, and the 5. That flat 3 is what makes a minor chord sound minor. It's just 1 note different between the 2 chords. And then finally the diminished chord is 1, flat 3, and flat 5. So it's really important to know all 3 of those arpeggios, and there's many more. There's so many extended chord arpeggios you can do. You can tap on all these different extensions, which we'll eventually talk about. But for now, getting just those 3 basic triads down, triad meaning a chord with 3 notes in it, or an arpeggio for that matter, will really help you a lot, and it'll allow you to play over pretty much any chord you hear, especially in just kind of standard rock, modern music. Those 3 shapes will get you a very long way. So let's at least learn those. So you already know the major arpeggio. So the minor arpeggio involves just flattening that 3rd, right? So if we're playing a C major arpeggio, like you've been practicing from the first video, it goes like this, right? Okay. So let's talk theory just for a second, because I want to make sure you guys understand this. So that C major arpeggio, the 3 notes of a C chord, the 1, 3, and 5 of that scale is C, E, and G, okay? So the C major arpeggio then would be a mix of those 3 notes. This particular shape starts with the G the way I played it. So it would be G, C, E, G. And that's the exercise you've been working on. G, C, E, and G again. But then the root is the C, so you can go backward, E, and that's where you resolve, is on that C, okay? So that's what makes it a C major arpeggio. Now, if you think about the theory for a second, if we want to flatten the 3rd of the scale, we're talking about that E note needs to be flattened. So all you have to do to make a C major arpeggio into a C minor arpeggio is just to flatten the E. Well, it turns out the E only appears once in this exercise, so you've got G, C, there's the E. So all we have to do is flatten it 1 fret. So instead of, you end up with, so that 1 note flattens, the rest of it stays exactly the same. Okay, so I'll put the tab on the screen for that. All right, cool. Now the diminished arpeggio is the 1, the flat 3, and the flat 5, okay? Diminished chords and arpeggios are very kind of dark and mysterious sounding. They're very unstable. They want to resolve back to the 1 in a lot of cases, which, if you don't know your theory too well, may not make a whole lot of sense to you right now, but take my word for it. It's a very strange sounding dark chord, but as an arpeggio, it's very cool sounding. So let's do the same thing again. Now this time we have to flatten the 5 as well as the 3. So now we're talking about flattening the G's as well. So we're going to have C, E flat, flattened 3rd, and G flat, flattened 5th. So the first note turns into that, turns into the G flat instead of the G. The C remains the same. Here's your E flat, the flattened third, and then the G flat to finish it off. Okay. Right, so it's a very cool arpeggio. It's one of my favorites is that one. It just sounds really, I don't know, just dark and mysterious. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's very cool. So what I did when I was learning my arpeggios, I just didn't want to sit there and have to do that C major arpeggio over 3 strings over and over and over. Like at first that's cool, and that's why that's what I gave to you in the first lesson to work on. But after you get the hang of that, it's like, okay, now let's do something different. So what I want you to do now is practice 2 things. One is switching between these 3 shapes, and the other thing is to reverse the pattern, because you don't want to always go from low in pitch to high in pitch. It's also really cool to go from high to low, just reverse it. Okay, so before we get into the exercise, let me explain that. Now, fortunately, reversing the order, really, the picking technique and everything remains exactly the same. So if you think of it this way. So the way you were practicing it was down, 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 up, pull off, up, and then start over. Well, if you reverse it and start with the highest note, all you're really doing is kind of like start doing the exact same thing, only starting halfway through it. So we're going to start with the up, pull off, up, then down, down, down. So it's the same thing exactly, just starting halfway through it makes it sound like you've reversed the whole thing. So up, pull off, up, down, 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 up, pull off, up, down, down, down. Okay? All right, cool. So it's, even though it's kind of the same thing, I remember the first time I tried doing like a descending in pitch arpeggio like that, it kind of just threw me for a loop a little bit. It was just a little different, and it's a difficult technique anyway, so any change takes a little getting used to. But for this exercise, let's do it that way. Let's do the descending in pitch, then ascending, so we're basically doing it backward than before. And let's also mix in these shapes. Now, this is an exercise that, as far as I know, I created. I don't remember seeing it anywhere. It's just one that I kind of came up with on my own. But what I'm doing is I'm starting with the C major. Okay. Then moving to the C minor. Then finally moving to the C diminished, right? But I played it in such a way to where there was no break. I didn't have to stop. It was just a constant flowing thing. And then I also would move it 1 fret at a time down the fretboard. And it just gave me like this, well, like I said, it's just like, it doesn't stop. It's just constant flowing exercise that allowed me to just keep playing and keep working on it. And I didn't have to worry about anything else. I didn't have to stop. I could just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. So let me show you how I arrange it to where there's no need for a stop between the shapes, to where you can just seamlessly go from one to the next. So we're going to start with the C major. See what I did there? So I went through the major arpeggio twice, but then right there switched to the flat 3 to make it that minor shape. Now I'm ready to do the minor shape. So I'll play it again slowly. Cool. So by just moving my index finger down in that one particular spot, I didn't have to stop. You can just keep going. So here it is again. And again. Okay, cool. Now to get the diminished arpeggio, you can kind of do the same things. Okay, so I'll play it nice and slow. Okay, so the tab was there on the screen, so you can just follow the tab and it'll kind of show you how that arrangement works. But here's what's interesting. When you end with that diminished arpeggio, look at where your index finger is. as you play it, it's not on the 12th fret anymore like it was when you first started. Now it's on the 11th fret. Now it's in perfect position to start over with the major arpeggio, only now you're a fret lower than you were. So now when you start over, you're there. You're on the B now. So I'm going to go through the whole thing and then go to the second set of arpeggios. This time it'll be based on, it'll start with C, C major, C minor, C diminished, then B major, B minor, B diminished. And I'll play it slow with the tab and you can see what's going on. So here we go. So if you keep doing that pattern over and over, you get the exercise I was playing at the beginning of the video, which is you can just keep going down the neck, fret after fret after fret, after you go through each of the three positions, okay? This is a great exercise because as you might have noticed before this video, if you've been working on this, but if you didn't notice it before, you're definitely noticing it now, is that these arpeggios can feel different depending on where you play them. I mean, obviously the frets toward the top of the guitar are smaller, closer together. Down here, they're wider, farther apart. They're actually harder to play down here just because the stretch gets a lot farther. But you want to be able to play it anywhere, right? So you don't want to just be limited to any part of the fretboard. So I would recommend you can start on the C major and work your way all the way back. But you can even start like way up here if you want, a real challenge, and go all the way down the fretboard doing the same exercise, okay? So that's what I'd like for you to do this time. This lesson's a little shorter than the first one because you've got the technique down now. Now it's just a matter of learning your shapes and practicing the heck out of it. And I mean hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And I can't stress enough, play this slowly enough to where it sounds clean. And I really talked about this in the first lesson, so I won't go into it a whole lot right now. But I'll just say this. If you sweep pick and every note isn't clean, it just doesn't sound good, and you're training yourself to play it sloppy, which is a huge waste of time, and later on you're going to have to go back and start all over pretty much, and obviously you don't want to do that. So think of sweep picking as like, even if you're playing really fast, you have to be able to hear every note. You don't want to just be this just crazy, super fast mess. I mean, it might look impressive at first until someone really takes a look at it and it's like, yeah, it just doesn't sound any good, and you don't want to do that because there's a lot of people that do, so don't be one of them. All right, cool. So one note at a time, nice and slow if you have to, make it nice and clean. You want to hear every note and have the timing of each note be really well. So again, what you want to do is go slow enough to where you can play it perfectly and not any faster than that. Slowly build speed over time. Play to a metronome always when you're practicing this stuff. If you don't play to a metronome, you'll probably get your notes played cleanly over time, but the timing won't be right, and the timing is every bit as important. That's the other thing I've seen a lot of people do when they're sweep picking is maybe the technique isn't too bad, but the timing will be bad. So it'll be like something like that, to where you can just tell like some notes are way faster than others, and they're just not on that perfect beat the way you want to sound like a machine almost, is the goal. And you do that by playing with a metronome always, always, always. Another thing you can do is get Easy Drummer. I should be a spokesman for Easy Drummer because I'm such a fan and I've recommended it so many times. But it's a great program. I won't go into it now because I'll talk about it for an hour. But basically it's like you can create drums very easily in it at any tempo you want in so many different genres. I love practicing over Easy Drummer because I feel like I have a real drummer in the room helping me practice, which is awesome. It beats the clicking metronome, which gets annoying after a while. But hey, if that's all you have, that's fine too. And there's even like free metronomes online where you just go to a website and you hit play on it and you get the beeping noise, which is good enough. So long as you're practicing the timing, it's all good. It's way better than not doing it at all. So make sure your muting technique is good on this. Take your time with it. Get those shapes down. And next time, we will talk about expanding these shapes into larger arpeggios that cover more than these 3 strings. That's when you start getting into like the really kind of classical sounding stuff. A few bands come to mind, like Unearth. The intro to My Will Be Done has some awesome sweep picking intro to that uses this like 5-string arpeggio. Necrophagist comes to mind. If you're into death metal, technical death metal kind of stuff, they use sweep picking like constantly, and they're just wonderful at it. They just sound absolutely perfect when they do it. Yngwie Malmsteen, there's a bunch of people that do this technique. And when you start doing it over more than 3 strings, like you do these large arpeggios, it starts sounding really cool. But first, to get the 3-string arpeggios down, get the shapes down, have fun with it, spend tons of time on it, and keep building your speed until you can really rip it out, and it'll start sounding really cool. All right, very good. The last thing I will mention is earlier in the video, I was talking about chord construction and arpeggio construction, talking about major chords being the 1, 3, 5, diminished as 1 flat 3, flat 5. If that doesn't make any sense to you, it's okay. You can still practice this. But really, I highly recommend you get at least a nice, solid basics theory knowledge under your belt. It's going to help you understand this stuff so much better. You know, the technique is only part of this stuff. If you have to understand what you're doing, too. It's really important. I mean, you know, I would not want to be the kind of guitar player that could play super fast, all these flashy riffs, but have no idea what I'm doing, have no idea what key I'm in, no idea what scale I'm playing, no idea how to apply this crazy lightning fast stuff to an original song because I don't understand how any of it works. You don't want to do that. And I was like that for a while, I'm not going to lie. I was self-taught for many years before I got my education. And after I got my education, I decided to write a book about music theory. And because, you know, for like I said, for a lot of years, I didn't understand it either. And then when I finally did understand it, I really can't express how much it helped. I mean, I thought going into it, maybe it'd make some difference. Like, I knew it'd make some difference, but I had no idea what a huge difference it was going to make as far as my level as a musician. All the hours and hours and hours I spent on technique and playing, of course that's all important, but the hours I spent on theory were every bit as important. And I really can't stress enough just how much you really need to take on music theory and at least get the basic knowledge down. So one thing you can do about that, because going to school is expensive and getting guitar lessons is definitely a good option, and you can go with me for that if you want. We can do online lessons, or you can do lessons in person if you live in the Tucson area. But another thing you can do is go to my website at www.soundtheorystudio.com. And I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Guitar Theory, and it's an introduction to music theory, specifically for the guitar, even though it will apply to any instrument. Music theory is universal amongst all instruments, but it's specifically geared toward guitar. And the book will take you from the very beginning, assuming you know nothing about theory at all, and take you all the way through chord construction, scale construction, the modes, how to figure out the keys of songs, so you know what scale to use to improvise over them, and a lot more. So I highly recommend it. It's an ebook, so you can actually download it right now. You don't have to wait for it to show up in the mail. And it's at a very reasonable price, and it's written from somebody who understands what it's like to not understand any of this stuff at first, and how frustrating it can be and how difficult it is to learn. So I wrote the book specifically to go step by step in a very slow and simple way, so that I think really anyone can understand it. And it'll take some time to go through the whole book, but once you do, you'll have a really good knowledge of theory, and it'll be a really nice foundation for you. So go to www.soundtheorystudio.com and check that out. And more sweep picking videos on the way. I'm not sure how many more it's going to take to finish this off, but at least one more I'm definitely excited to get into these extended arpeggios, and we'll actually do some tapping of some of these chord extensions as well, which makes the arpeggio sound that much cooler. So I'm sure you've seen that if you're into certain kinds of music where there's a lot of sweep picking going on, where they do this sweep motion and then tap on, you know, a higher note and extend the arpeggio even farther. It's really cool. So we'll get into that too. So thanks so much for your support, guys. Always really, really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe. It helps me very much. And take care, guys. Thanks again. Talk to you soon.